They're coming for us. Get them. Get them. They're coming in hot.
I got one.
Don't get cocky, kid.
But it's a Pod Bros podcast.
What do you mean it's a podcast? You haven't been shooting? They're all over the place.
Well, no, but they've got all sorts of good shows like Pencil and Ink Reviews and The Guy Huddle and Players vs. Podcasts. I mean, was I supposed to?
Yes. What? How many podcasts do they have?
There's tons. You got other ones like The Accidental Wrestling Fan and Take Aim Outdoors.
That kind of sounds like we should make podcasts, not war.
Aww.
Record. I hated it.
What's up, everybody? I'm Richard.
And I'm Shawn.
And we're speaking the language of bromance. I'm sorry I sounded sad just a second ago because this is gonna be our review for Rogue One. And right before I pushed the button, he was like, I hated it. And then I hit the button and then I was sad and I didn't know how to start.
I absolutely loved it. I am literally an hour past seeing it, and it's probably my favorite movie of the year by far. It was really, really good. Not just for like a Star Wars movie. I mean, just in general, it was just a really good movie.
It was a good movie.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. When did I see it? When did I see it last? Ooh, I saw it Thursday evening. So opening day was Friday. The theater I was at, fairly smaller town. So the theater I was at, they had shows all night. They were running 2D and 3D shows, and they were doing 7, 7:30, 8, 8:30. Like there was like 4 or 5 shows on Thursday night. So I got tickets for the first one, 7:00. Now, okay, so with this one, I wasn't as super hyped for this as I was Force Awakens. Now, when I say that I wasn't super hyped, like I was still very excited to see it, obviously by the fact that I bought tickets for the very first show that was available.
Mm.
But the bar wasn't like super high for me. Like I had no real expectations going in to the movie. The only things that I knew was from the trailers, and there was a piece of news I heard that said there was going to be no crawl, no open crawl. It was just going to go long time ago, galaxy far, far away, and then start.
Well, and that's the thing that's awesome. I mean, I can see like there wouldn't be any hype for this movie. And so I don't know, last time we do we're not really great on movie reviews. So we'll probably start like the first part of this spoiler free, and then we'll kind of let you know when we get into spoilers. But again, this is like one of those movies I think everybody's going to go see, so it probably isn't a big deal.
Right. And okay, so I was just gonna say that. So my expectations weren't high, like I wasn't expecting the second coming on the screen, but I knew that it was going to be a Star Wars movie. B, it was going to be a bigger budget movie, so there were some expectations. Like I figured it was I assumed it was going to be pretty good.
But as a Star Wars fan, were you? I mean, because I'm not like a huge Star Wars fan like you are. You are the Star Wars, like that's your Turtles compared to to me. Like Turtles is my stuff. That's how you feel about Star Wars. Probably even more so.
So knowing that, I would say that I was the least hyped for this movie out of all the movies.
And is that because this isn't one of the what do they call in the
saga
ones?
The saga movie.
This isn't a saga movie, so you don't really know what to expect. Like to me, going into this, if I'm a huge Star Wars fan, like I could be like, this just could be a nice money grab. Every other year they'll do a down budget movie of something, and I'll go. Not as many people will go compared to the saga, but still a lot of people will go.
Well, I wasn't expecting low budget, but yeah, kind of. I'm like,
well,
it's still Disney. It's still Disney money. Like they're
But by low budget, I'm thinking more like I guess maybe that the story's not there. Because I mean, I think the best comparison to like what's going on with Star Wars right now is like what's going on with Marvel. I mean, they're owned by the same company.
Sure.
When Iron Man came out, like that was like this huge thing. Like nobody knew what to expect.
Right.
And you could probably pick a handful of Marvel movies that you're like, that feels like a money grab movie. Like I don't get much feeling from that movie.
Incredible Hulk.
Incredible Hulk, Ant-Man, things like that. And so I mean I could see a Star Wars fan going into this and be like, I don't know what to expect. So I don't really have much expectations. And to me, like this was just like in general, if this wasn't a Star Wars movie, if it was just Rogue One, like it's a really good movie. Like you don't have to know a lot of the backstory. Um, there was a lot of good tidbits thrown in there.
Oh, there was a bunch. Easter eggs aplenty.
Yeah.
And they went deep. They went super deep.
And they weren't overbearing too. And that's what I'm curious about when we get a little bit more in the spoiler stuff, what Easter eggs you saw, because you'd probably be able to explain a lot of them to me that I didn't even recognize.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things we usually talk about when we talk about these, like, so how packed was your crowd? I know Force Awakens, you sat outside and hung out with some people for a bit, but with this one, I'm guessing you just kind of went right in when it was seating time.
Force Awakens, I waited for, shit, I don't remember how long. I think it was like 8 hours, 8 or 10 hours in line. And keep in mind, this is the Midwest and it is December.
And it's a lot. I I just had a thing pop up on my Facebook that said like those memory things.
Uh-huh.
And it was the one that you posted about sitting outside. So I think last year is when Force Awakens came out.
Yeah, I think last year was December. Yeah, last year I think it was like December 19th or 20th.
So yeah, and I think it's a lot colder right now than it was then. Like it's
cold. It's fucking cold.
We had freezing rain last night, so I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to make it to the movie today.
I was gonna wonder that because like there's like ice advisories and there's driving advisories, and I was like, is he gonna fucking make it to the theater and back?
I get out, I'm like, oh my god, this is Hoth.
Because I remember you saying like, oh, I'm going in the morning, and I'm like, okay, cool, and then I'm looking outside and I'm like, don't die.
I just get on my tauntaun and bundle up, and we made it.
Then halfway through, you got to cut Tiffany open and hide inside her to stay warm. I thought she smelled bad on the outside.
She's like, what are you doing with that flashlight? Hold still.
Stop it. Just stop it. Sorry.
No. So what was your theater experience like for this one?
So it was super cold, and it was the first showing. And I was honestly flabbergasted because the theater I was in was right around like 50% full.
That's not bad. For a Thursday night, all the Thursday night shows I've gone to have always been like half full or less on opening nights.
Really? Because, I mean, we're talking, like the first show of, granted, it's not going to be, like, I know, like, that, obviously this movie's not going to do Force Awakens numbers. We're talking about, the highest grossing domestic film in the history of ever. But, like, I was expecting a pretty packed theater. Like, I got there probably half an hour early, and I figured I was going to get a decent seat because of the weather, but I wasn't expecting, but I got the exact seat that I wanted. Super happy.
So you said about half full, so like 60 people?
Yeah, about that.
Okay. Well, I know, like I said, every Thursday show I go to, if you don't go to the later ones in the night, because I think a lot of people still like that midnight experience, like getting there like a 10, 11 midnight show. If you go to the early ones, like the 6 to 8 range, like, yeah, most of them are usually half full. Like Batman v Superman was like that. Avengers, both the ones I went for that one were like that. Civil War was like that too, like about half full.
The place, I mean, where I live, it doesn't seem like they really do midnight showings anymore. It seems like they opt more for like a 7 p.m. or an 8 o'clock show that night rather than opening at midnight.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing they're doing now is they get more showings in for the opening weekend. So they'll do like a 6, 7, 8, 9, split them up through midnight.
And also that way they don't have to staff the place at 1:30 in the morning.
Well, the movie theater here, if it's a big flick, they'll still have an actual midnight showing. So they still do it. So they're still there till 2 in the morning, but they just pile them up more, which is probably good because then you kind of split the people through, so you don't have a jam-packed theater right at midnight.
Yeah. But yeah, I was super surprised because I was expecting it to be packed. And so to the point where I actually even turned to the people next to me. I'm like, where the hell is everybody? And they're like, I'm thinking the exact same thing because I mean, obviously I wasn't expecting the same line as Force Awakens or anything, but I was expecting it to be a lot more full than this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure weather probably had a little bit to do with it.
Oh, I'm
It's not a
sure.
saga film, so it's not as hyped.
Like, okay, like your theater, like considering the ice and everything else, I'm sure your theater wasn't.
Yeah. So last year I went to the Saturday morning show too, which is it's kind of nice because then we can do this right afterwards, and it's a good excuse to get up early and go. And
Sure.
I don't know about you, but seeing a movie at like 8, 9 in the morning is awesome.
I have not done that. I would like to, but I haven't.
It's so because you get up and you get ready. It's the first thing you're really doing in the day is going, sitting in a theater. You watch the movie, you leave, and it's like 10:30 in the morning still, and you're like, I have like my whole day still to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. But yeah, so we had really bad ice last night, so the roads are still pretty covered. I barely slid into home. It's like it usually takes me about 20 minutes to get home from work. It took me an hour.
Yeah, I think the state was like, don't drive. Our state issued a thing that was just like, just don't even bother.
They issued a Hoth warning. But yeah, so I got there. I actually went with a guy that listens to our show, Chris, LLB Army member Chris.
Woo!
And we got there about 8:30. Walked up. So this I always love like theater.
And then he was like,
too.
I wish Rich was here. And then you were like, me
yeah,
too.
I know. He's like, oh, I thought this was like a joint thing, like you and Rich would be here. I'm like, oh well, Rich is a little ways away, but I'm excited to be here. It'll be fun. He's like, oh, I forgot I had to go to the hospital. No, it was awesome. So we bought our tickets earlier. So we had them on Fandango or whatever. And we walk up there and there's this older dude, and he's like you can tell he's pretty pissed off. He's like, I thought there was a 9 o'clock show. He's like, I think they're as confused as I am right now. Talking about the people working behind the counter.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And on the sign it didn't say 9 o'clock. It just said 9:15. And so we're kind of hanging back, and this is all outside. So it's freezing cold. So I'm standing there shivering. Like, well, I either want to get inside or I want to go back to my vehicle because it's warmer.
Yeah, let's have this argument indoors, buddy. Hey, Cletus, how about let's have this over some hot cocoa?
So the one of the managers looks like she was coming out and was like, hey, I was just curious what time you guys are going to open up. She said, well, first show's at 9:15, so about 15-20 minutes. I'm like, awesome. We're going to go back to the vehicle and hang out.
Right.
But so we get in there, we get our tickets, we go sit down. There might have been 6 people in the theater.
Yeah, I believe it. Considering weather and whatnot, I believe it.
Yeah. And being an early show. It was me, Chris, the grumpy old man, and then as we were sitting there, like maybe 2 or 4 other people came in, so like 6 to 7 people altogether. Did you see it in 3D or did you just see it regular?
I just saw it in 2D. I'm not big on 3D. I mean, that's just personal preference, but
I'm not either. We end up seeing this one in 3D because they didn't have any 2Ds till later in the day.
Oh, I see. I see. So you saw it.
So as I get in there and sit down, I don't really know what I was expecting. I've heard everybody say good things about it, and I don't really know what I was expecting. Like, I knew this was going to be the story of them getting the plans for the Death Star, right? I guess do you want to jump right into spoilers?
I was going to say first that like I was expecting a heist movie. Honestly, when you're talking about like, oh, they're going to go get the Death Star plans.
Oh, yeah.
I was expecting like a heist movie. I was expecting like Ocean's 11 in Star Wars.
I remember you mentioned that like back in when they first announced they were doing the Star Wars stories.
That's what I figured. But as I was I think there was like a little 3-minute doc they came out with and stuff like that. I slowly came to the realization. I'm like, oh, this is not a heist movie. I was like, they are shooting each other. This shit looks gritty. This shit looks real.
Mm-hmm.
Like this looks like a war movie. That's what this looks like. There was a news story I saw where they were talking about how about halfway through shooting or towards the end of shooting, they decided to change direction a little bit.
Okay.
Where they were talking about how they were gonna try and film some film some other scenes and film some other stuff to try and kind of brighten up the movie.
Yeah.
Because they said it seemed really, the initial cut of the film seemed very gritty and kind of downbeat.
I remember you mentioned like there was a scene. It's not in the movie, but a scene where like Darth Vader's on the beach or something and just destroys a bunch of soldiers. And you said that they'd filmed it and everything. I thought you were the one that told me this. Like they'd filmed that and everything.
No, I never.
Maybe I had this in a fever dream, but I guess like Darth Vader destroys this whole army, and like it's like basically from what I heard or read, it was like a scene from Saving Private Ryan, but with only Darth Vader doing all the killing. And apparently, either after this was written or after it was filmed, they're like, "Wow, we can't put the bunny ears on this one, guys. Yeah, can't put the bunny ears on this one. Oh, I'm sad. War is hell."
So that didn't like scare me where, because with some movies where they're like, oh, they're going back to do some reshoots, you're like, oh, I don't know what that's telling me.
I hear that happens a lot more than you think. Mainly on big budget films, but
so that kind of that I would say that probably kind of put me on edge a little bit. Not really too much, because I was still hopeful that it was gonna be, at the very least, it was gonna be decent. And boy, oh boy, it was very decent.
Yeah. So I guess the only thing else I can say before we jump into spoilers is I wasn't really sure what to expect either. I don't think I was expecting a heist movie. I guess the only thing I had fears of is what I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that it was going to just be not a very good storyline and just be kind of a thing. It's like, okay, well, we spent $100 million, we made $600 million. We're going to throw these Star Wars stories out every other year just as kind of a filler.
Sure.
And if you're going to stop listening right now, it is not that whatsoever.
No, not a filler.
Go see it. Come back and check us out when we talk about the spoilers parts of this. But it was, like I said, probably my favorite movie of the year.
Yeah, I feel like you should edit in like a tag warning, like have like a siren, be like wah, wah.
Wah.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
All right, so guess jump right into spoilers. Like one of my main things. So one of the things I always hear about whenever people talk about Star Wars.
If you're going to talk about the end, we're saving the end for the end.
No, it's not the end.
Okay.
What I'm going to talk about is basically the guy who developed the Death Star. And one of the things you always hear about in a lot of like people who make fun of Star Wars, always like, oh yeah, this big powerful ship, and there's one tiny little thing.
I was thinking the exact same thing, because that was always like one of the like, that's the one of the things where I would argue, be like, oh, you kind of have to suspend disbelief a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's a giant, space station armed to the teeth that's able to kill a planet in a single shot, and it's the size of a small moon. But, maybe there's somebody fucked up and there's a design flaw where you shoot one little laser down the hole and the whole thing blows up.
All people make mistakes. It happens. But before I went to see this, I was like, you know what? I bet because I don't know. I'm sure George Lucas didn't think like this whole storyline, right?
Well, I was going to say I was going to say that when it comes to his opinion, apparently he saw the movie and loved it.
Oh, good.
Apparently and I would say that his opinion of Force Awakens was not that high.
He said he didn't like it?
I think he veiled it, but you could tell that it wasn't his complete cup of tea. Like I think he liked it, but I don't think he loved it. But this, from what I've heard, his opinion of this is, he's like, this was fantastic.
But that makes sense too, because everything in this story really isn't his baby. None of the characters that are his creation. The universe is, obviously, but everything else is kind of.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because Vader's in this.
A little bit.
Grand Moff Tarkin is in this. which
A little bit, yeah.
I did not see coming, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's fucking Peter Cushing."
That's the dude that took over the Death Star in the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but
He
kind of jumping back.
died, and so he died the year that Star Wars came out, or the year before.
It was, so you're saying that was actually him, or are you saying that that was somebody playing him?
No, I'm saying that was an entire. Oh my god, you didn't know this? That was an entirely CG character.
Oh no, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
that was a Grand Moff Tarkin. That was a completely CG character.
Wow,
They
that's
finally
awesome.
perfected the. Well, because you saw it a little bit in. I don't know if you ever saw the
Civil
last
War.
Tron movie where
Mhm.
you had shit. Who plays Lebowski? I can't think of his name. But you had Bridges, you had old Bridges and young Bridges in Tron, and then like you said, Civil War, where they kind of
Okay.
de-aged Robert Downey Jr. a little bit, and you saw it, and then it seems like they've done some fucking work on it because Grand Moff Tarkin, that entire character was completely digital.
Oh, I didn't realize that at all. I thought it was a real person. That's
And he had
awesome.
more fucking screen time in this movie than he did in the movie he had when he was alive. Like he's all over that movie.
Let's see. So the part I was going to bounce to. So like we're talking about. There's one little bitty thing on the Death Star that can blow the whole thing up, right? And I mean, I knew the gist of it. Like from some of the trailers I saw, you figured out that the lead character's dad was the one who helped build it.
Right.
And so I was like, because of all the, like, Disney's trying to, like, kind of fix the universe a little bit, or at least make the universe make more sense. So, like, I bet that her dad, builds the ship and then he puts this thing in for some reason. I didn't know if it was for the rebels or what it was, but he's the one that designed that specific flaw.
Right.
And sure enough, that's what he did.
Well, you called it because I didn't see that. But when he started talking about it, I was like, oh my God, they just closed the loophole.
Yep.
The whole reason that it's so easy to fucking blow up is because it was by design.
Mm-hmm.
It was on purpose, and that was amazing.
That was a good little, like I said, just kind of ties that whole universe piece together a little bit. And now, people can't, I mean, they can still joke about it, but it's like, oh, well, you know why? Because of this story.
Yeah.
And I don't know, going back to, like, George Lucas, do you think that was just a plot point in his movie, or do you think he had ideas about something like that? Or do you
I
know
think
for
it was,
sure?
I think more than likely, I think it was simply a plot point in his movie.
Gotcha.
Because, I mean, you're talking about, I think when you're talking about the story that George Lucas wrote for A New Hope is, I think he was more concerned with doing an exercise in a transplant of the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From Joseph Campbell's work. I think he was more concerned with that rather than the actual mechanics of why this is this and why this is this. I think that when it comes to explaining what things are and why things are, I think he tries to do that more visually than through actual exposition.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you're asking if he initially thought, oh, there was a guy that built a flaw on the Death Star. No, I don't think so.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, I guess going spoiler, like, the thing about this film is I felt like it really crescendos up. Like, the pacing on it seemed perfect. You get a little bit of action at the beginning, but it's not a ton of action.
I will say, I don't know. For me, the first, like, not really the first 15 minutes, but there's a good 10 minutes, not really even 10 minutes. There's some bits or pieces in the beginning that I feel kind of make it slow to start. Now, I totally understand why the pacing was the way it was. You have a lot of you have a lot of characters to introduce, and you have characters to bring together, and motivations and things like that. So I mean, there's a lot of screen time to devote to people, and so in terms of like pacing of the story, it starts out a little sluggish for me.
Yeah, I felt it was a little slow.
Now that didn't really take it away from me because I think the runtime on this movie is what, 220,
something like that. Yeah, 2.5, something like that.
So I mean, could they have kind of done some minor cuts here and there and sped it up a little bit, sure, but I think that was simply a choice that got made, and like I was saying earlier, since there were reshoots and there were elements added to the movie
Yeah.
to try and make it lighter, think that this was probably the best marriage of competing visions of a movie that you can get.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like we said, since there were reshoots and stuff like that, you can tell that, or not really that you can tell. I mean, there were two different direction. There were two somewhat directions that the movie was kind of going in.
What do
But
you mean by that?
I mean, like there's, you have the gritty, realistic war movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's kind of peppered in with these more lighthearted moments.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
But I would say that those moments don't take away from the, there's nothing wrong with peppering in some happiness in your bleakness.
Well, in all honesty, like the grittiness of it, I mean, it's to me, this is a war movie.
Oh, it's totally a war movie.
And you get that grittiness feel, like the moments where, I mean, all these characters are basically going on the suicide mission.
Not basically, they're literally going on a suicide mission. Because, I mean, like I said, we're in spoiler territory.
Oh,
they're all dead. We're not getting Rogue 2.
Do they say that in Star Wars: A New Hope, that everybody died to get this?
No, they do when you're talking about the plans for Death Star 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Gotcha.
They say, because they said they retrieved information from some Bothan spies, and then they say many Bothans died to bring us this information. But when it comes to the plans for the first one, they don't say anything. It just starts out with, hey, Princess Leia's on a ship and she's got Death Star plans. How they got to her, who the fuck knows?
You don't really know. But, I mean, I like that about this, though, because it really gives, I think, because the problem we have with any of these movies, and again, I might use Marvel too much, but you can't kill the characters. You can kill the bad guys all you want, but you can't kill the main characters.
Yeah.
And in this, you've basically said, hey, guys, you get to make this movie in its own silo. Your basic concept is these spies, these people go and get the plans for the Death Star, and these characters don't exist in the universe at all because they basically die right here.
Well, I mean, but that's not necessarily true. They didn't all have to die, but they do.
Well, for continuity, I mean, if you didn't have those people...
I mean, they could just, give the plans and then head off to tropical paradise and never be seen again. You don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think that leaves a little bit too much of an open ending or openness to it.
The thing I was going to say when it comes to that is I think not that, since they said we're not, I mean, because they basically said before this movie came out, it was, hey, take it while you can because you're not going to see a Rogue 2.
Yeah.
And I think that considering that since they spent the money that they spent making this movie, because I mean they didn't nickel and dime that shit.
No, yeah, I don't know what the final tally is, but
there's two completely CG characters in that movie that you didn't even know were there.
What was the other one, the robot?
No, the other one was Leia.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, she seemed a little
she seemed
more,
a little kind of plasticky in the cheek.
Yeah. I was expecting, because I know they said her daughter, I guess, was going to play Leia in something. So I thought maybe they'd cast her daughter and did a little bit of post-production on her.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. So, okay, so well, I guess what I'm saying is when a studio spends that kind of fucking money on a movie, not only do they expect a huge return on their investment, but if the movie does well and they spent that kind of money making that movie, they're like, okay, let's crank out some fucking sequels. Like, everybody loves this movie, they love these characters, let's put them in more shit so that way we can, keep this machine going. But you're not getting that with these people because they're all dead.
To an extent, though, but like, I mean, so this movie comes out and, let's say everybody loves it like we do. I mean, yeah, you're not coming out with Rogue 2 in 2 years, but now you're coming out with a Star Wars story. And people are going to be like, listen, I love that first one. This one's got fucking Han Solo in it. Or this one's got fucking Chewbacca in it. Or whatever. or maybe even just some other small piece of the Star Wars saga that they branch off on. It's like that's that's where we're gonna go.
Yeah, but I mean, and you get that sense from this movie, like these movies where it's just Rogue One, a Star Wars story. This is a completely self-contained thing that weaves into the saga,
And I think that's awesome. Like,
oh, it's totally awesome, and because it went in seamless. I mean,
yeah. Well, you're not bound to anything.
you could take the end credits off of this movie and just take the opening crawl off of A New Hope and just be like, here's the big movie.
Yeah. But I think that's what's nice about that, because it makes it a little bit more, it doesn't bind them to anything. If you come out with like you do come out with a Han Solo movie, you're kind of bound to the Han Solo character. And if you do a prequel, you're kind of stuck with what you have to do. With this, it's your whole objective in this movie is that they just have to steal the plans and get them to Princess Leia.
Steal the plans, get him to Princess Leia. Everything that happens in between that, whatever.
Yeah, it's your own story, and I think that's genius because it allows these people to come up with these creative ideas like this. I mean, like look at how this movie went, where the character that built the Death Star nobody ever knew about. Well, now there's a character that's in this saga, this whole Star Wars universe that created the Death Star and created a small piece that allows it to blow up. Like you fixed this whole loop, like you said a minute ago.
Yeah. You close the loophole, and then you introduce a bunch of characters. And I will say, when it comes to the characters, you don't get a lot of backstory on these characters. You when it to the point where I couldn't even tell you names.
Yeah, I think was the main girl, was it
Jin? There was Jin. So the ones I do remember, I remember Jin and Cassian.
Yeah, Castia or Castia, something like that, yeah.
And then K2SO, which I'll tell you what, K2SO, thumbs up. That dude's the fucking...
You know who the voice was?
Alan Tudyk.
Yeah. I was expecting a Leaf on the Wind reference at some point, but we didn't get it.
That was for me, I get that, hey, let's pepper in some dialogue. I mean, he wasn't really the comic relief because it was all dark humor, but
yeah.
I loved it. Loved it. You know what the possibility is of her shooting you? It's high. Very high.
Yeah. So I guess when kind of mentioning too, like this movie being self-contained, it allows for you to kill those characters, which adds to the grittiness of this. Because like we're saying, this was a suicide mission,
and adds real fucking tension. Because
well, because you're not tied to the characters.
Exactly. Number one, you're not tied. Well, you're tied to the characters enough that, like, I was sitting there watching it, and I think it was when the oh crap, the blind guy. I think it was when he died.
Yeah,
that's when I was like, oh my god, like, are is any of them gonna make it?
I kind of felt like none of them were safe through the whole thing because of the fact that none of these characters exist in the universe except in this movie.
Right.
So to me, it allows you that ability to kill these guys off. And I think it was when because I think the robot died first. Like he was one of the first ones to die. I'm not gonna lie, I shed a tear. That was sad.
That was sad.
Just a robot, like, got his blaster, is just holding on, just getting shot, barely able to keep going, but he kept going all the way. It's like, oh, Alan Tudyk.
Why can't you live through a movie?
Yeah.
Just live through one movie.
But like you said, that adds real tension to it.
And it adds stakes. It adds stakes to the movie. I watched, Force Awakens, and, let's go Force Awakens. Like, Han Solo dies in that movie, and he's a big, huge character. But you kind of, number one, once Han Solo steps onto that bridge with Kylo Ren, then I'm like, this is gonna go badly. Like, you kind of see it coming, and then you just sort of make your peace with it. It's still quite shocking when it happens,
yeah.
But you watch that movie and you know that Rey and Finn, like, they're gonna live.
Yeah.
Like, as bad as shit gets, you know they're gonna live. Like, in your meta in your head, you know they're gonna live. You don't get that with any of these people in the movie, and I think that adds actual real dynamic tension,
Yeah.
because in your head you're like, none of these people are actually safe. Like, everybody could die. I wonder who's going to live. I wonder if anybody's gonna live.
I love the fact too. So, I mean, as you're seeing this big, I guess maybe we should wait to jump into the big battle. So, what's some of the stuff from the beginning of this movie or in between the movie that you saw? Like the big thing I took away from this, like Jedis are pretty much gone, right? Like there's an understanding that there's no longer Jedi.
Yeah. Do you know how many times a lightsaber sparked in this movie? Once.
And it was a red one.
And it was a red.
That was badass.
No, we're not there yet. Stop it.
But I mean, he had the blind guy, and I guess those two guys were like the protectors of the Jedi Temple. Is that what their job was? Or
they called themselves Protector of the Wills, which perked my ears up because I was like, oh my God, because in the original, this is what I'm talking about. When we're talking about deep cuts, George Lucas's original screenplay was called A Journal of the Wills.
Okay.
When he wrote the very first screenplay of what would become A New Hope, he talks about it's called, instead of being called, like, I think instead of calling it actual Star Wars, it was called The Journal of the Wills.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're talking about, oh, he's the guardian of the wills. I was like, that's a reference that no one knows.
But me, I know this reference.
And then you drop in characters from all over. You dropped in Bail Organa.
Yeah, I saw him in there.
Which I was like, oh my God. I was like, they pulled people from the prequels.
And they don't even mention his name, really.
No, you just see him and you're like, oh. And then he talks about his friend.
Yeah, I caught that part. Your Jedi friend.
I'm like, oh, that's Obi-Wan. And then he talks a little bit about Leia, and I was like,
yeah,
oh my
I
God,
trust her with
God.
my life.
Oh my God.
So I don't know if I would have. I saw him come out, and I was like, hey, that's the dude from Dexter. And then it triggered my mind. I was like, oh wait, yeah, that's the dude that's in the prequels. That's Leia's dad.
Yes, that's
not
Leia's dad.
Dad, but
His
adoptive dad.
Foster dad. Adoptive dad. Stepdad. He just tried to buy her love. So you peppered in that stuff. Then you peppered in super minor characters like the guy that gets his arm chopped off in the cantina.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about those. Everybody, it was funny because even though it was just like six of us in the theater, when that happened, the guy behind us, he's like, ha ha, kind of points. I was like, yeah, that's the dudes from the first one.
Yeah.
But they weren't on the planet that Luke goes to, right? Like
they weren't on Tatooine. They were on. See, that was the other thing when it came to this. I don't completely remember characters' names, and I really don't remember planet names, because they mention a bunch of planets that you've never seen and that I've never seen. And it always seemed like with Star Wars, it always seemed like they tried to make it a point to make planets that have a specific terrain. Like, oh, this is the snow planet. This is the jungle planet. Now we're on Forest Moon. Now we're in Desert World,
The one they blew up was like Hada or something like that.
Jeddah. That one I do remember, and the only reason I remember that is because they had the Jedi Temple there, and they said they were mining kyber crystals, which is another reference to George Lucas's old screenplay, saying that initially when George Lucas wrote the screenplay, instead of it being the Force, that the powers that the Jedi have come from these kyber crystals. And so the power was drawn from the kyber crystal to do all the things the Jedi do. And then he later changed that to the Force.
Gotcha. Is that the crystals they use, though, for lightsabers, or is it something else?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Because I know somebody had mentioned, the blind guy had mentioned it. The blind dude, though, when he... I I mean, we've seen it in the trailers a little bit, but that dude was
That
badass.
dude was badass. Totally fucking
Walks
blind.
up there, takes all them out, stabs the dude in the foot. He's like, "How's your foot?" And punches the other one. It's like, "Oh, I can't wait to see this guy in another movie."
Oh.
Oh,
And then he gets a hood put over his head.
yeah.
Are
Really?
you kidding me? I'm blind.
That was great. The scene with K2. So after they beat all these Jedi or beat all these stormtroopers, they're starting to walk away, and K2's got the two. It's like, where are you taking them? Prisoners. They're prisoners? Yeah, I'm taking these prisoners to prison them. We'll take it from here.
Did you know that wasn't me?
Yeah,
getting
that
shot?
part was awesome. Yeah, of course.
K2SO. He was like Alan Tudyk, like sold the shit out of that fucking character.
Oh yeah, did a great job with that.
That dude was the star of was the breakout star of that movie, and he wasn't even in it. It was just his voice, but I was totally down. And even if I didn't know that was Alan Tudyk, I still would have been like, that's my guy. K2SO is my guy. I hope I see him in another movie.
Well, you will. I mean, those Imperial robots are all over the place.
Okay, so I feel like we're just jumping around to the shit we thought was cool. So, performance-wise, I mean, no one really, aside from K2SO, I would say that all the other characters hold their own, but no one really stands out to me. Even the villains, I think, were, no one really stands out.
Well, I guess, I mean, Darth Vader was in it a little bit, but when you heard James Earl Jones,
yeah,
and his little bit,
well, they go to, and I wanted them to when I can't think of the kind of the bad for the movie. I can't think of his name. Krellick?
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember what his name was either.
So when he initially flies to the planet that Darth Vader is on, because he's gonna go seek this audience with Vader, to have Vader help convince the Emperor that he should have the Death Star and not Tarkin.
Well, I think he just wanted a nice pat on the back.
Right.
He's like, look what I did. I built this giant moon Death Star thing.
Yeah.
Can I get a that-a-boy? That's all I want.
I want to know what planet they flew to, and I wish they would have mentioned the name, because in the expanded universe, Darth Vader had a castle on a planet that had a lot of volcanic, activity or whatever. And I can't think of the name. I want to say it's Biss. That doesn't sound right though. I wonder
if they left it vague, because I was wondering if it was the planet where he basically became Darth Vader, where he kind of that mining planet. Yeah, I was wondering if that's what it was supposed to be.
Maybe.
That was badass too. And the shot, my favorite shot, is when the bad guy is sitting on there and the doors open and you see him in the shadow of Darth Vader and it just looms behind him. It's like that's a good shot.
So credit to fucking Gareth Edwards. The guy that directed this movie.
I'm not sure.
Gareth Edwards. So the last movie he did, I think, was Godzilla.
The new one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, he shot the shit out of this, and he shot it as like we said. I mean, it's a fucking war movie. It's Saving Private Ryan with lasers.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know it toes the line with what you think a Star Wars movie should be. Because when you initially see a Star Wars, when someone says to you a Star Wars movie, you think of some lighthearted fun with some action, some blockbustery kind of action sequences with lasers,
with one or two scenes where you're kind of like, oh wow, that's deep.
And there's some spaceships flying around shooting each other, and there's some people on the ground shooting each other, and then you have people fighting with laser swords. Initially, that's your impression of a Star Wars movie. This guy said, no, what a Star Wars movie can be. A Star Wars movie can be just as gritty and realistic as watching a World War II film.
Yeah. I just kind of thought about this, so this is the first Star Wars movie where Jedi really don't have, or Sith really don't have any big part in the movie.
No, not really. I mean, they kind of skirt around it. They talk about, the Jedi Temple on Jeddah, and they, but I mean, you really get the sense that, as it was at that time in the timeline, like Jedi are gone,
Yeah.
and you don't,
Well,
and like you said, you don't see any. You don't
this
even
is probably what 20 years after Episode 3,
uh
maybe
I think
more.
so. Maybe no, not more, but maybe a little less. Maybe 19 or 20.
Okay, because
So
Princess Leia would have been in that range, 18 to 20.
yeah. Well, no, in the film, I thought she was. Oh God! See, now I'm trying to think. In A New Hope, I want to say she was. No, I think you're right. I think maybe 19 or 20, or like 18 or 19, and then Luke's about 18 or 19.
For Harrison Ford's sake, I hope she was at least 18.
Well, no, by the time you get to oh shit. By the time you get to Empire, a couple of years had passed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did read or hear in her book that those two banged, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Which is the thing, like as a kid, that's the one thing you hope for. Even though you didn't know you hoped for it, but you were like, "Oh, I wonder if they actually liked each other." Oh, they did. They did a
Mom,
lot.
I have a new hope. I hope Harrison Ford bangs the Princess Leia.
Okay, so I think we both agree we like the movie. We like the aesthetic of the movie.
Oh,
We
yeah.
like, I was surprised that somebody showed me what a Star Wars movie could be. A Star Wars it's honestly it's a lot like Marvel in the sense that, every movie, it doesn't have to be a superhero movie. Like sometimes it can be a spy movie. Sometimes a
Yeah.
and this is like, a Star Wars movie doesn't always have to be what you think a Star Wars movie should be. Maybe it could be a war movie, which is like what you fucking got.
Yeah.
And you got a movie with real fucking tension. And like I said, since, it was in the sense that it was like Empire in the sense that it really gave you a sense of stake,
Yeah.
because I mean, like, that eventually things are going to fall into a certain place, but you don't know how things are going to shake out for the people that you've been watching.
Yeah.
And then you come to find out they're all fucking dead. Like, that's fucking bleak. At the end of A New Hope, like Death Star blows up and they're like, "Yay!"
Yeah.
And then let's give medals to, the big teddy bear looking dude. And at the end of fucking Return of the Jedi, they blow up Death Star again. It's like, "Yay! Let's have a party with the teddy bears on the teddy bear planet."
I guess we're excited. You have to be excited with this one, though, so that they didn't blow up a big Death Star-esque machine.
No, at the end of Empire. So then at the end of Empire, it's like, where's Han Solo? Oh, he got frozen in carbonite and stolen by a bounty hunter. Well, what about our main character? Well, he got his hand fucking chopped off. What about the rebellion? Oh, a bunch of them died when the ice planet was assaulted by gigantic machines on 4 legs.
But that's what you kind of get with this one. Like, even though everybody dies, each one of those characters died in a way that they knew they were sacrificing themselves for the greater good.
It was heroic deaths aplenty.
Oh my God, you had it all started with the robot. The robot's trying to keep the stormtroopers at bay so they can figure out where the disc is to get it uploaded to the ships. And so
which
he
I
dies.
thought was so fucking. I thought that was fucking cool too, because number one, once they find the plans, it shows the same kind of 1970s design of the Death Star. That's number one. Number two is, in this world of wireless technology, it's like, oh, why can't you just email the plans to the fucking rebel base on Yavin? Like, why can't you just shoot them an email and Death Star plans JPEG attachment? Like, why can't that happen? And they're like, oh, the file's too big. It has to be on you have to physically, transmit it to the ship. And then even then, the ship can't just send the transmission. They have to get you have to get it on an actual hard copy. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have the Death Star plans on a fucking disc by the time we get to the end of the movie. A disc that you see Leia give to R2-D2 in A New Hope. I was like, that's fucking genius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they tie it together well. I mean, you gave these creative people, and I think that's what I like about this is you can take kind of like a little puzzle piece out and you can make your own little thing and it fits right back in perfectly.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe it's not even, that's probably not even a good analogy. It's probably like you take a puzzle and you say, okay, you see this top quarter here? Like, go ahead and extend it out to that piece. Like, you can build whatever you want right there. It just kind of has to flow back into the main picture.
Yeah. But honestly, like, while I was watching, like, initially starting the movie, I wasn't expecting everybody to die, but they all did. Like, I figured they're, like, they get on the ship to go to, Beach World, Jungle Beach World, or Hawaii World, who the fuck
Hawaii
knows?
World, yeah.
And,
Planet 5-0.
and you see, like, the characters that you've been talking to and everything, and that's great. And then you just see a bunch of red shirts, and you're like, oh, those guys are gonna fucking die. Like, all those guys, all those the guys are like, hey, we're with you. We'll go to Hawaii World with you. And you're like, all those guys are gonna die. Like, in your head, you're like, all those people are gonna fucking die.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting everybody to die.
I mean, what sucks is that as an audience, we're conditioned to believe that. So when those people die, I think it shouldn't give you as much of a shock, or it should give you more of a shock than it did, maybe. Because the whole time you're like, okay, those guys are going to live, but then they die, and you're like, oh, okay, well.
I guess they're going to live then. Oh, nope, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
But go through the deaths. So you had the robot, you had the blind guy. I was expecting when he was like, the Force is with me and I'm with the Force, when he was doing that walking part,
yeah,
I was expecting like he would walk over there, push the button, and then it would like do some kind of snapshot back to him inside the ship, and like he basically used like force push.
Oh,
I thought that'd been kind of cool. So like he was actually had some force in him.
Okay.
So he used the force to push the lever up.
But who knows they didn't use the force, because like there was a bunch of people shooting at him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you talk about, hey, stormtroopers can't shoot. All those guys.
Yeah.
Apparently stormtroopers are a bit better shots in this movie than you've previously seen.
It's like they've taken all the stereotypes that Star Wars has created and like, listen, this isn't your 70s cartoon Star Wars. This is fucking Saving Private Star Wars.
This isn't the holiday special. We're not talking. This ain't your life day, motherfuckers.
But I mean, even like there was a small part. I don't know if you caught it. There was a guy in the ship. They're like, man, the lever's over there. We got to push it. And the guy's like, I got this. And he takes like 2 steps out and gets shot.
Yeah.
Like that's like a realistic thing. It's like, oh my God, that dude's going to be the hero. No, he's not.
Nope. He's dead. And he's dead.
I bet you feel like an idiot now.
Yeah. Which to me was like almost straight from a fucking the beginning of Private Ryan.
Oh yeah.
Where like I can't remember the scene, but I think Tom Hanks is in a foxhole and one guy gets up and he's like, "Oh, we gotta get it!" Poof, and it drops. And then another guy's like, "Oh my God!" Poof, he stands up and poof, and he drops.
Well, it's kind of like the scene in that where the guy gets hit in the helmet, you hear ting, and he takes it off and was like, "Oh, you lucky son of a poof!"
Yep.
He takes one right in the head.
And yeah, I mean, like you don't see, like I wouldn't say, even though there's violence and the violence is gritty, like I don't remember there wasn't any blood and gore in this movie.
No.
So I mean, if you're like, oh, should my kids see this movie? Like I think it's fine, because yes, it's quote unquote sci-fi violence, but
it's, I mean, of violence that you see, it's probably the most realistic. Because like I said, you and I have never been in war, and I hope to God that we never have to be. But this seemed like, besides lasers, you change those for bullets and everything else for more realistic artillery. I mean, that's
sure.
Somebody trying to put up a front.
Let's see. We've covered characters. I mean, like I said, I wasn't overly attached to any of them. But when they start getting killed one by one, I was kind of like, oh.
But yeah, just going back, so real quick before we jump into anything else, so just talking about the guys and all their heroic, knowing their sacrifice happened. So you had the blind guy, then you had his friend who went there and he started repeating his saying, "The Force, I'm with the Force, and the Force with me," and he goes on a shooting rampage, knocking everybody out, and he goes to the last bullet. I mean, it was, he gets taken down. He takes down the dude that shoots him. There's the pilot that basically defected.
Yeah.
And he's putting up a fight and he gets the word out. It's like, you got to destroy the shield so we can get this out. And right when that happens, somebody chucks a grenade and he has that look on his face like, I've redeemed myself.
Yeah.
And like, no fear of death. Like they all knew their death meant something.
And not even just that, you got a bunch of fucking pilots up above the planet.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a whole like we're talking about like, oh, this gritty realistic fighting on the beach and whatnot, and that's all great, but there's like up above the planet there's a gigantic ass fucking space battle going on, and you see a Star Destroyer hit another Star Destroyer. And I was like, oh my God, that is awesome. Oh, and okay, you want to know another little tidbit, or two little tidbits when it comes to that space battle? They fucking wove in scenes from A New Hope into that space battle. Like the guy that played Gold Leader, that's all that dialogue and all of like even like the actual shots and the dialogue are from A New Hope.
So on A New Hope, like the battle that took place in space and when Princess Leia leaves, how long? None of that's in A New Hope, right?
Right.
Or is that so? She's leaving. So Vader catches up with her like hours later after this whole thing happened. Right?
I don't know how much later he catches up with her, but yeah, you're right. He does catch up with her. So it's basically, and yeah, I mean, like we were saying before, how it's seamless transition. You could cut the end credits off one movie, cut the opening crawl off A New Hope, and sandwich them together. Like that's how. Like I don't know if it's hours later. I don't know if it's a day later, but it's close. It's damn close.
What's interesting, you're talking about the space battle. Most of those shows, whenever you see like basically talk about the red shirts, the ships blowing up, you don't really feel anything when that happens. You're like, oh, okay, that's a cool effect.
No, not Porkins.
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was like, oh, somebody died there. Because I don't know why, you just felt more emotionally connected to each person in the ship.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Not really me, but I'm a callous human being.
Yeah, they could all die. I don't care.
Whatever. As long as the plot moves forward, like that's fine. But okay, so number one, they wove in actual footage from A New Hope into this movie. So that way you had a continuity of a character that was in one space battle and then survives and is in the next space battle.
That's pretty cool.
The other thing, and I don't know if you probably didn't pick up on this in the space battle. There was a guy that's in an X-Wing, and apparently his call sign was Red 5, and he gets blown up. And you're like, oh no, not Red 5, and there's and his ship blows up, okay? Red 5, that's going to be Luke's call sign once he's in the X-Wing in A New Hope. So like you see that blow up, and I'm like, oh, there's a vacancy for Red 5.
That's dark. That's a little dark.
Well, it's true. You watch it, and I'm like,
you cheered.
The ship blow up. It's like, this is Red 5. I'm taking fire. I was like, oh, that's gonna be Luke.
I just imagine he says Red 5, like, bullshit. That's Luke Skywalker's. Okay, we're fine. Continue.
We're good. We're good people.
So I guess the thing that the kind of maybe end up as kind of the finale part of this.
Oh, here
Darth Vader.
Fucking Vader. Now
you talk about grittiness.
He's on screen. He's like, you see him, like they play the fuck out of him in the trailer. Like you see him in the trailer and you're like, oh my God, Darth Vader's in this movie. Now, when you first see him, it's probably not till maybe like an hour into the movie.
Yeah.
You're an hour into the movie and you see Krellick fly into Volcano Planet, and then you see fucking a guy floating in a tank, and then you're like, oh my God, that's Darth Vader.
Soaking in his hot tub.
And he's flanked by the Red Guards, by the Crimson Guards. Oh, that was awesome. But like, I'm sitting there and I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot he was gonna be in this movie. I was like, I've been sitting here watching this movie for an hour and I still haven't seen Darth Vader yet. So you get there and he has this little scene, and it's James, and it's like you said, he's in the suit and it's James Earl Jones's voice, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, I want to see some more of this shit. And he does a little force choke, force choke on Krellick, and you're like, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so all that whole scene probably lasts what, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes?
Yeah, not very long.
Okay, so on screen, he is on screen. If we're counting that and the end, he's on screen for less than 5 minutes. The entire film,
Yeah,
less than
probably.
5 minutes. Now, Shawn, I know that you weren't big in the movies when you were younger. Now I was. And when I was a kid, Darth Vader was one of the scariest motherfuckers you could ever hope to meet or not hope to meet.
Yeah.
You're talking about a giant dude in a big fucking black suit with the power to choke you out with his mind and then stab you in the face with a laser sword. And he didn't seem like he cut off the hand of his own fucking kid. Cuts off his own kid's hand, tortures Han Solo,
Yeah.
tortures his daughter. Granted, he didn't know at that point that Leia was his daughter, but he tortures his daughter in one movie, but still, like, he's still torturing like a 19-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So he tortures a 19-year-old girl. He tortures Han Solo. He fucking cuts off his own son's hand, and at that point, he does know that Luke is his son. Cuts off his own son's fucking hand, and you're sitting there going like, this is a bad motherfucker. But then, so that hell happens, and you get to, the end of, he kind of, yes, you're right, he redeems himself at Return of the Jedi, but I don't think he loses his badass quality at that point.
No.
Like, he's no longer the most evil person in the fucking galaxy because he, kills the Emperor and saves his son, but he's still kind of a badass. Like, you're still thinking like, I wouldn't want to fuck with Darth Vader. So then we go to the prequel movies, and then you see a fucking 7-year-old kid, and then he turns into a whiny 14-year-old kid. And like who cries and is like, I love Batman, blah blah, and you're like, shut up. You were supposed to be fucking awesome, and now you're crying because you hurt sand people. Like, I don't care. So by the end of episode 3, and even episode 3, like, yeah, he turns evil and kills the younglings in the Jedi Temple and stuff like that. But then you get him in the suit and you get no, like, you get that whole spiel, and you're just like, oh my God, like, what is happening here?
This is not my badass Vader.
Like, I thought you were supposed. This is not my badass, most evil motherfucker that you could ever hope to meet, Darth Vader. So that is at that point, up to watching this movie, that was my opinion of Darth Vader. Was like, oh, I used to really think he was fucking cool. And like, you hear people like talk about him in the fucking movies, like, Darth Vader, don't fuck with that guy.
Yeah, and this one you're talking about, Rogue One?
Yeah. Like, well, even in other movies, you're like, even in the other movies, they're like, oh, fucking Darth Vader. Like, that's a motherfucker you don't want to deal with.
Don't pull him up on Skype. He'll even choke you out on Skype.
Yeah, like all the like Imperial officers are fucking afraid of him and blah blah blah, and you're like, why? He's a fucking whiny 14-year-old kid.
Just bring up Padme and he cries for an hour.
And fucking and so you get to Rogue One, and at that point, that's your opinion of Vader going into this movie. Like, I've never seen a character reclaim their title of most badass evil motherfucker in the galaxy so fast.
Just that like 2-minute scene, yeah.
He reclaimed that title in in under a minute.
Because I think the part that gets me is you see all the guys there and you hear goosh. I don't know if he's pulling off the door or what he's doing, but there's just a pitch black.
Well, at first you see the guys, you see the little rebel soldiers in their helmets, and they're running down the hallway. And at first I was like, did they just transition straight into fucking episode 4? Did they transition straight into A New Hope and I didn't see it? Like, a bunch of guys running down the hallway and you hear the same like alarm sound, but I was like, no, it doesn't look right or whatever. And then the hallway, like, okay, so the dude on one end of the hallway has the plans, the Death Star plans in his hand. And they're like, oh shit, the door won't open because the door jammed or whatever. And then the hallway's pitch black and the guys have their guns aimed. and all you hear is, and I was like, oh my God.
You all are gonna die.
I fucking no, that wasn't even my thought then. Like I figured it was gonna be, like you see Darth Vader and there's gonna be a bunch of stormtroopers.
Oh yeah, I was kind of expecting that too.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, wait a minute. And then
Yeah.
the lightsaber sparks off, and I was like, oh my God, what's about to happen? Like in the sense that I was like, is this like you couldn't like I couldn't imagine what was happening to me on the fucking screen. The lightsaber sparks off, and I think the guys in the hallway have the same reaction that the audience has, where they're like, holy shit. So then they start shooting, and as soon as Vader's he's got that saber going, he's pew, 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 pew. I was like, oh my God.
Picking dudes up, slamming them into the roof.
Oh, I had my youngest daughter was next to me when I was watching it. As soon as that lightsaber sparked off, I was like, oh, and I grabbed her leg, and she was like, Dad, stop. I was like, oh my God. And he mows through an entire like, honestly, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a fucking like 80s horror movie.
Oh yeah.
Where like Jason is on one end of the hallway and he's just walking, he's walking like a fucking like a badass. Zoom, zoom, grabs a motherfucker, holds him on the ceiling, walks past him. Then right after he walks under him, throws his lightsaber back to cut him in half. Then grabs a bunch of weapons, throws them at a people's hands, and then just roam, fish in a fucking barrel. And the guy that has the Death Star plans is on the end of the hallway, like, here, take. He's banging on the door. He's like,
yeah,
help us. And you're like, oh my God. Darth Vader became Darth Vader again in that 50 seconds.
Yeah.
He hands the plans to the motherfucker through the doorway. Then that guy takes off. Meanwhile, Darth Vader stabs the guy through the door.
Yeah.
The door opens and you just, wow. Like he goes through probably 10, 15 people?
Oh, there's like 10 or 15 people in the hallway, and then he goes through more on the other side of it. I mean, it's the equivalent of being chased by a great white shark in the ocean. Like, you're effed in the A.
Yeah.
You're swimming towards that boat, hoping for a miracle.
Yeah, it totally reminded me of, like I said, like an old, one of those 1980s. It reminds you of Friday the 13th, where you're just like, this dude is getting from one end of the hallway to the other, and woe to anybody that's standing in the hallway when that happens.
And the end shot where he's on the ship's left, and he's just on there.
Space, he's just standing there in space. Just.
It reminded me so much of like the new Darth Vader comic. I think they only did like 25 issues, but he's just complete badass. And that one happens after the Death Star blows up. It happens after A New Hope.
And I'll tell you what. And I think Kathleen Kennedy, who's the producer of our entire childhood, and the current president of Lucasfilm, I think that whole bit, I think that was intentional, because I think she was like, let's do this and let's see how people react to it. Because once she realizes that we're all like, oh my God, that was fucking amazing, then she's like, oh, you know what we should do? We should make a whole movie like this.
A whole Darth Vader's a badass movie.
And you know what? And I would love to see a Darth Vader movie based on that comic.
Yeah, those comics would be good.
Those comics were amazing. That was amazing. And like you said, it was a 20. I think you're right. I think it was like a 25 issue run.
It just ended. I think I got 2 issues left to read on it.
It ran for like 2 years. I think the last issue came out in October of last year. Was the last issue. But yeah, that whole story, that would be great if you want to do it like that. But if you just want to show me a movie of Vader walking down hallways, I'm fine with that
just
too.
Killing people.
And okay, so like that was that was the most amazing part of the movie for me. But that I don't want to say that to take away from them. Like, the movie was fantastic for me.
Yeah, it was a great
The
movie.
movie was a great movie.
The only other tidbit I was wanting to throw in before we get into some Richard's closing thoughts was, so I don't know if you caught this, but when the pilot was being interrogated by Sargon or Sargoff, the dude that had the metal legs,
Saw Gerrera. And the only reason I remember his name is because he is actually in the Clone Wars cartoon.
Oh, I gotcha.
But in the Clone Wars cartoon, he still has all his arms and limbs, and he doesn't have breathing problems.
I gotcha. Well, but he pulls it up to his mouth.
Yeah.
And it goes, and you see the look on the pilot's face like, fuck. That reminds me of something awful. But as we're wrapping up this Rogue One review, Richard, do you have any Richard's closing thoughts?
I've looked at some of the reviews online, and not really. No, I've looked at a couple reviews online from newspapers or whatever. I've also, I think we've all like kind of flown through our Facebook feed or whatever, just kind of gauge what people have it. I've seen a lot of dislike. I've seen some dislike coming from people about this movie, and some people are like, "Oh, this doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, and this doesn't, this doesn't complement the trilogy at all, and the pacing is slow, and I don't like any of these characters." Okay, well, I don't think you're meant to be emotionally invested in all of these characters because they're all dead. So, you're not getting a Rogue 2 because everybody's dead. Also, the immediate, like, they don't even give you, there isn't even room for a sequel. Like, the sequel to this movie is A New Hope because they might as well just say hours later and then start A New Hope.
I heard somebody call this like episode 0.
Yeah, in a way, or episode 3.5.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're meant to be emotionally invested in these characters. I don't think that. I mean, I'll agree that I had my problems with. I had a slight issue with the pacing of the story too. But I think that the second half completely makes up for any sort of lagging you get in the first half. Like, by the time, like, I was in the theater for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I would say probably, half an hour in, I was like, man, this thing's going a bit slow. But by the time I got to the end, I was like, holy shit, I was in there for 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a 2-hour movie.
By the time I got to the end, it did not feel to me as long as it actually was. Didn't feel like it drug. Even though it felt like it drug, by the end, I completely forgot it. So, is it a Star Wars movie? Yes, it is a Star Wars movie, and I'm speaking on behalf because you're talking about because this movie I feel not only gives you a fresh take on what a Star Wars movie can be, I think it does more than adequate fan service, even providing you with super little Easter eggs that you just pick up on, and you're, oh, I remember that. Oh, there's Mon Mothma. Oh, there's General Dodonna. Holy crap, they fucking brought Peter Cushing back from the dead. How the fuck did that happen? So you get, and for me, it is a Star Wars. It's definitely a Star Wars movie. And for people that don't feel like it's a Star Wars movie, I think that you need to, open up to what a Star Wars movie can be. And Shawn kind of said this to a degree, and I hate to say it when it comes to Marvel movies too, but I would say that do you feel like, a Captain America or the Avengers or something like that, do you feel like it completely embodies what you think a comic book movie should be? Do you think the Winter Soldier completely embodies what a superhero movie should be? I don't think so. I think it's a spy movie with Captain America in it. And I love that. I love that you can do that. That you figured out a way to say that, superheroes aren't one-dimensional. They're not just punch, smash, grab. And superhero movies aren't one-dimensional. It's not all just, the megalomaniacal villain throwing his arms up in the air and saying "Wahaha." You know, a superhero movie can be so many different things. And a Star Wars movie can be so many different things. It doesn't have to be just an endless supply of white uniformed cannon fodder against the scrappy rebellion. Sometimes it can be, it can show you that, hey, there's real fucking cost here. Like, people actually die. And we didn't even talk about this at all, but the motivation for a character like Cassian, I think that fucking moved me a little bit, where he looks at Jin and says, I've done some fucking terrible things. And you see it at the very beginning of the movie. Yeah. I've done some terrible fucking things. And so I'm going to go with you to try and get these Death Star plans, because I have to lay my head down at night knowing that all those terrible, horrible things that I've done were for a purpose.
It was for a cause I believe in. As he mentioned, he did all those things for a cause he believed in. I think this was probably the first thing he actually believed he was doing for the greater good.
Right. And that's kind of one of his, that's kind of his story arc, is like, I'm a terrible fucking person, but I feel like I'm evil. I feel like I'm evil, but I feel like I'm a necessary evil because I'm working for the greater good. And all those guys that get on the fucking ship that all end up dying, they're all, we've done terrible shit for the Empire and we want it justified. And
you see that in the end. You see all of them, like, the ones that die, they have that look of like, my life is being sacrificed for something better. Like, this is the right decision.
And I think that this entire movie, on the way it looks, to the motivations of characters, to the characters themselves, I think they challenge the entire notion of what a Star Wars movie is. And some people can take that and some people can't. And so I guess the closing thought would be, maybe a Star Wars movie can be something else. And I think that this movie fucking proves it. The end.
All right, well, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So we got a new survey out. If you guys have a chance, go check it out. It's survey.libsyn.com/language of bromance. I'll have that in our show notes. It's just a quick survey. Kind of helps to see what our audience is, I guess. Visit our website. We're at languageofbromance.com. Follow us on Twitter. We're at languageofbro. Email us at eatthebeaver@languageofbromance.com. Check out the LOB intelligence reports. They come out on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe and leave a review on Google Play Music, iTunes, and Stitcher.
And don't forget to check us out on the Podbros Network,
the Rogue One Podcast Network,
the podcast network that we've done terrible things for.
Terrible things. And if you're in the need to throw a little bit of money in our tip jar to help this rebellion, go to our Patreon accounts, www.patreon.com/languageofbromance.
We could totally do ranks like the LO Rebel Army.
Red Squad 1. Red Squad 5.
Red 5.
Red Fox 5. There's an opening.
Yay!
Was there anything else before I close her out?
No. I mean, I could talk for another probably hour about this, but I think we should leave these people alone.
All right. Well, that's all the bromance we have for this show. I'm Shawn.
And I'm Richard.
And I say we eat the beaver.
Help us! Cuts a motherfucker in half. Then snaps a dude's neck.